If everyone would have a seat, we're going to get started with our meeting.
Oh.
Good evening, everyone. It is 6:00 p.m. on Tuesday, October 31st, 2023. I'd like to welcome everyone to the special meeting of the Peoria City Council. This is a special meeting on the 24-25 biennial budget. I'd like to welcome everyone who's attending here in our City Council chambers, as well as everyone that's listening at channel WCBU and through our online channel through YouTube. Clerk, the council mics are open. Please call the roll.
Mayor Ali, Councilmember Allen, Councilmember Sear, Councilmember Gordon Young,
Present.
Councilmember Graham, Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Kelly, Councilmember Euler, Councilmember Riggenbach, Councilmember Valpula,
Present.
and Councilmember Vespa.
Here.
You have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
A notice was received by Councilmember Jackson of the City Council in accordance with rules established in ordinance number 16,142. Councilmember Jackson would be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically unless a motion objecting to Councilmember Jackson's electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by 2/3 of the members of the City Council physically present at the meeting. If no such motion is made and seconded, then the request by Councilmember Jackson to attend electronically shall be deemed approved by the City Council, and the presiding officer shall declare Councilmember Jackson present. Hearing no objection, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Jackson?
Here.
She's here. Okay, thank you. I'd like to also acknowledge a birthday amongst the council. A happy birthday to Councilmember Dr. Bernice Gordon Young. Happy birthday. Everyone, please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Again, this is a special meeting of the Peoria City Council regarding the 2024-2025 biennial budget. We do have another similar such session next Tuesday, November 7th at 6:00 p.m., same place. And then on November 14th is our regular council meeting and also a public hearing regarding the 2024-2025 biennial budget. Madam Clerk?
23-343 is a communication from the City Manager and Finance Director Comptroller with a request to hold a discussion on the 2024-2025 biennial budget, and on your desk there is a revised handout of the report backs.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have really, I think what we'd like to do this evening is Finance Director Craddy and I would like to just kind of run through the report backs very quickly and then get into council's discussion. I think as Finance Director Craddy sent out, tonight we're asking council to come up with any additional report backs as well as any suggested motions to amend the budget as is currently presented. We ask that those requests be given to us either this evening or no later than Friday of this week so that we can prepare the budget motions for council's consideration at the meeting on the 7th. Then hopefully we can have all of those budget motions acted on and would still put us on that path to be able to have the budget approved by the 14th of November. Okay. So with that, I'm going to jump into the first budget report back, which is just simply pertaining to Glen Oak Avenue. That is the stretch from Berkeley to Pennsylvania that runs by OSF Hospital. That's inside the footprint of what is the master redevelopment area that OSF adopted when the East Village Growth Cell TIF was adopted. So as we look at that East Village Growth Cell TIF, we do, I think, have some funds there that could pay for the road improvements, but we want to have a discussion with OSF about any potential cost share, and we'd like to report that back to you at the next meeting. But I think that's something that we'd like to look at. It's within their footprint where they have control over development, so we want to have that conversation with them.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'll turn it over to Director Crotty to take the remaining three.
On to the second question, which was the sidewalks funding from Morton Square to the riverfront. This was a request from Councilman Riggenbach. Staff went back and developed a cost estimate of what that would look like, and that was included in this report back as what the amended CIP sheet would look like. The cost for that addition would be about $1.3 million next year during the budget. In terms of question number 3, that was the scheduled use of fund balance. That was a question from Councilman Sear. The table that's presented is the overall addition or use of fund balance in each one of the funds for the city over the next year. What I wanted to draw council's attention to is the $30 million in fund balance use is heavily tied to 2 specific areas. The first being the stormwater utility. This has close to $27 million in planned capital improvements next year. So that is part of the drawdown. This is just a backlog of some of those projects that were needed to get done in the stormwater utility area. In the capital fund, it has a negative balance of about $15 million. That is primarily because of the decision to not issue debt in this budget for capital improvements, instead pay going that with the use of general fund dollars. And as if you remember from the budget presentation, we're recommending to council to make that transfer to capital in the 2023 fiscal year and not the 24 fiscal year. So that's why you're seeing the negative number in the capital fund. Both of those funds would still be within compliance with our fund balance policy. It's just planned capital spend down. Then the last item was a question on the debt limit. And this came from Councilman Sear as well as Councilman Kelly. As a home rule municipality, the city of Peoria does not traditionally have a debt limit. The council, however, has a policy in place that the debt limit for the city should be 10% of the equalized assessed value. So for this year, that number is $211 million, give or take a few thousand. The city currently has about $30 million of its $150 million in outstanding debt that counts towards that debt limit. So the current debt limit that the city would be able to go out to GO under its policy would be $181 million. And that's what I have with that. If there's any questions on those report backs, or as the manager said, anything else related to motions or other report back requests, we're here to answer any questions.
Director, I have a question on item number 2, report back number 2, the sidewalks from Morton Square to the riverfront at $1.3 million. Is that a project that could be phased over more than 1 year?
And I'll defer that to Director Powers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, yes, it can be. It can be phased in a number of years through engineering to any particular point. Just because of the character of the project and the nature of the project, it could be phased.
Okay.
At the pleasure of council, obviously.
Okay, all right. Can you give some thought, and I'm sure Councilman Riggenbach has some ideas, but can you give us some thought to between now and next week, how that might be phased?
Actually, we could do it now because we've had some staff discussion, so pleasure of the manager. I would
Yeah, I think there's certainly an opportunity to do this. In a brief conversation that I had with Councilman Riggenbach, if we looked at taking the multi-use path first to Jefferson, so coming from the park to Jefferson and at least stopping at that point, that at least gives us the opportunity to then look at the rest of the project. That's going to take the cooperation of IDOT, because both Adams and Jefferson are controlled by IDOT, and that's going to be a discussion point that we're going to need to have with them. So I think we could probably look at phasing that, maybe putting $200,000 into 2024 and the remainder into 2025, when we know that that we've got the green light from IDOT to go forward with something like that.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think that would be, admittedly, the price tag gives us all, I think, a little bit of sticker shock. It's a significant investment, but if I may just expound a little bit on the need for this and why it's so critical. If you head north on Adams Street and cross the expressway, you will go 8 blocks to Spring Street for the first signalized crossing of Adams and Jefferson to access the riverfront. It's another 7 blocks from Spring to Abington. I don't have the exact population of the North Valley residents, but it seems like that's an extremely onerous burden to expect families that want to take their kids to the riverfront, joggers, bicyclists, to have that much distance between signalized crossings. So that's one of the key features of this, which will involve IDOT, and as we all know, they don't move as fast as we would like sometimes. So I think this would be really intriguing to see what it would get that first section done to Jefferson. Immediately, let's make sure we label that phase 1 of a multi-phase project so that we can have that discussion with IDOT about how that crossing of Adams and Jefferson looks so we can safely access the riverfront for these residents. I would also say I spoke to Senator Kaler this afternoon about the project, and he's very supportive and will also help facilitate the meeting with IDOT so that his presence perhaps will help expedite some of that discussion. But I think doing it in a two-year cycle would be a logical way to move forward as we explore other grant opportunities, because let's face it, there's still opportunities to get outside funding as well.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Counselor, if I may, that also will give us time to facilitate discussion with Illinois Commerce Commission and the railroad. There's actually that hurdle, which may take even longer, just because it's a railroad. It's not a quick process. So having that extra time is actually, I think, of a benefit overall to the project.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just an item of clarification. The OPEB, which is Retired Employee Benefit, I guess. How do we get revenue into that? And why is it that there are no expenses coming out of that?
So the OPEB fund is set up for future post-employment benefits. It's one of the liabilities the city carries on its books, along with police and fire pension obligations, IMRF obligations, debt obligations. Our post-employment benefits is one. So this is a fund that is intended to help support that future expense. Why we have revenues in is because over the last few years, as the city has done early retirement incentives through IMRF, we have, in essence, funded those out of the OPEB fund and charged ourselves a 3% rate instead of the 7.25% rate that IMRF would charge to fund those. So we're saving that 4.25% interest rate. So the revenue going back in is us repaying ourselves from the IMRF fund.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments regarding the report backs? Okay. Councilman Seer?
Thank you. I just got a few comments and questions for the report back. First of all, thank you very much, Director Craddy, for the report back. Very well done again. My question is on the debt. I want to make sure all my colleagues and the public listening tonight understand how the debt works for us. And you and I had a conversation and another conversation this afternoon. Can you explain to us why our debt is important, and how can we, what's our current rating is, and how can we upgrade to the next rating for our debt, and what does it mean money-wise for interest rates and things like that, please?
Yeah, so the city's current bond rating is an A2 with a stable outlook. That is upgraded, I believe, since the previous rating had a negative outlook, but we've been able to move it towards a stable outlook. In terms of moving that needle towards a AA rating, which would be the next notch up that the city would look at, the rating agencies have made it very clear to us in our conversations with them that it's going to require one of two things. It's going to require us to continue to have strong reserves in place that the city's not had over the last few years, which would entail, having our fund balances stay above that 25% threshold for a few more years than what we currently have. The second larger item that they will always point to is that we need to make substantive progress towards funding our police and fire pension obligations for there to be the possibility of having a debt or a bond rating increase. In terms of kind of what that means to the city, obviously an increase in our bond rating would potentially mean a decrease in borrowing costs. It's hard to say exactly. I think your rule of thumb would be about 50 basis points or 0.5%. But what it would do for the city that we can't do right now is it would allow us to actually go back out into the competitive market to issue our bonds. Right now, we have to work with an underwriter and we direct place our bonds, which is a little bit of a more costly process for some of that initial offering process. So going to a AA rating would allow the city to go back into the competitive market and save some costs, and also potentially see some increased savings on our interest costs, depending on how the market is selling that day.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson, do you have any questions on the report backs?
Well, not on the specific ones that you all have been talking about. I did have some items that I would like to get an update on with regards to where they are in the budget.
Okay.
So if we're ready, I'm more than happy to mention those. I had mentioned we had seen the dedication of the Moffett Cemetery earlier this year, and there had been discussions about making some infrastructure improvements which would provide additional parking and things of that nature. I would like to request, if it's possible, if there's funds in the budget, to potentially look into completing that work, being that the cemetery has been dedicated, and Mr. Hoffer and his crew have spent the past couple of years raising all those funds and did a magnificent job with regards to bringing that whole project back to our attention, as well as the state's. And so I think with their portion of that being done, this would be the perfect time to see if we could provide the funds for the infrastructure improvements so that the people who would like to visit that area could do so and have places to park and come in and out safely. That was one of the items.
Before you go to the next one, Councilwoman Jackson, before you go to the next one, I just wanted to get some feedback from Mr. Manager on that. Do you know the estimated cost or where funds might come from?
We did receive some information from Mr. Hofer with some proposed changes to the footprint of the site. I think that Public Works staff has looked at that. It would be about $150,000 to do it. The funds could come from the Eagle View TIF if that's the direction that we wanted to go. So if Councilwoman Jackson wanted that in the form of a report back, we can put that together as a report back, and then also as a budget motion to bring that back for next week for council's consideration.
All right, thank you. And that Eagle View TIF, there's
We have sufficient
already
funds
available.
in the Eagle View TIF to pay for that. And the park is inside the TIF, and infrastructure improvements are an allowable expense under the TIF, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilwoman, you proceed, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager. The other item I was interested in was this would be with Director Powers. Director Powers, per the request of Park District President Robert Johnson, we met, I want to say, probably back in July. He brought to our attention the conditions of the curbs around Treewind Park Pavilion area, and we actually went and viewed that area, and it was determined, at least at that point, that Director Powers thought that would qualify for, I want to say, one of the CSO projects. And I wanted to find out if I didn't see anything in the budget about it as I looked through the booklet. And I wanted to find out if Director Powers could give us an update on the status of that
Director?
curb replacement.
Counselor, I hope you can hear me. Yes,
Yes.
we did, and we are still examining that, but it would be for an out year. We've already designed CSO year 3, meaning it would be outside of that area, but it would qualify in the area relative to CSO spending. During the site inspection, basically what we saw was an intersection, a park, and an opportunity, frankly, where in out years or future years for our CSO improvements, it would fit into the character of what we're trying to accomplish to mitigate stormwater and/or combined sewers in that area. We did not add it to this budget because obviously we had no time to plan, and we already had this project planned. It is still our intention to examine that and look at the funding we have to go into that area and do those improvements if it'll fit within the overall character of the program, which we have 18 years. Well, excuse me. Sorry, we now have 15 years because we've designed year 3. But we will look at that in the CSO program for an out year to get that done. Probably,
Okay.
I'm guessing, if I had to guess, probably year 7 is what I think we estimated on site when we were discussing through it.
Oh, I didn't hear that. But no, I was under the impression it would fall somewhere along year 3 or 4, but you're saying 7. You've planned that far out
We do.
with regards to the scheduling?
Yeah, yes, Counselor, we do. We are actually, if you look at the funding that we propose similar to the 5-year budget that we use for capital. We actually propose 7-year into CSO spending because we're borrowing money. So we're trying to stay within those limits. So I would presume it would be in the year, around year 7 would be an approximation.
Okay, thank you, Director Powers. And Director Powers, while you're here, I also, as I was looking through the budget too, I wanted to find out if we had started any of the work. We were able to secure the $2 million for sidewalks with the help from former Congresswoman Sherry Bustos, and that was specifically for 61605. We had talked about some public places where that could potentially begin to roll out, and I was wondering if we could get a report back on where or if any of that money has been spent yet.
It has not been received, Counselor.
Oh.
We are still waiting.
Oh,
It's still
my.
going through that federal approval
correct.
process, Councilwoman Jackson. So, hopefully we'll know more in December. Hopefully we'll have a federal budget
Thank you.
and continuing resolution. So, yes, Director Doolin.
Last year, when we got the congressional earmark for Harrison and McKinley, we got it in the kind of December, January. So I'm guessing this process is actually a little slower than last time. So if I had to guess a timeline to actually get the spending would probably be January and February. So I know Public Works has been working with our staff on all the paperwork and webinars at HUD, so probably the first quarter of next year.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Director Doolin and Director Powers. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're very welcome. I'm going to ask you, Councilmember Kelly, you passed around a proposal. Can you give us some insight now? Are you comfortable doing that today, please?
Am I comfortable talking? Absolutely, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, I passed out a proposal on eliminating building permit fees, not for action this evening, but for perusal over this week. And I'm going to make a motion on that next week. Certainly, if anyone has any comments, suggestions, etc., please contact me. But essentially, I'm looking at some things that other cities do not do that we could do that would hopefully make us stand out for greater internal investment and external investment. This is one that I call it a headliner. I keep looking for other headliners to make our city stand out in that competition among cities that we participate in. So if you could all have a look at that proposal, and certainly any additions, corrections, or whatever are, I'd certainly like to hear about, and I will be making a motion next week on this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Does any other council member have any new report backs requested for next week or any other discussion? Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just a quick question on the police station controlled access. The numbers are slotted down at the end in the future column, but then in the description it says 2024. So
I think that should have been updated. It's been moved to the out years for that control access.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have anything else?
Sorry, thank
okay,
you.
that's all right. Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one question for City Manager. My understanding, when we had the meeting this summer with Public Works, when can we expect our PCI report? Because I thought we'd try to, especially for the 5th District, trying to get the fund allocated to the worst area in the 5th District, and it's still not, to my knowledge, PCI is still not in. So when can we expect that report?
We have the data. I'm sorry, Counselor. Excuse me. We have the data. The data just hadn't been aggregated and basically analyzed by our consultant relative to what we will apply it to for pavement preservation for this coming year.
So can we see this report before the next 2 weeks when we might have a chance to finalize the budget?
We check with the city engineer and see where we are in that process. We just got the data recently, so that might be a bit aggressive, but I will attempt it.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Graham?
Yes, I want to talk about a core basic service tonight, and that's called fire rescue. Number one responsibility of our government is to provide safety for the people. All of you have had a chance to look at the reports coming in every morning as to what's happened in a 24-hour period, both in terms of significant events with more explanatory information from both the police department and the fire department. We recently had a fatality. Haven't had one since 2021, which I think shows how great our fire department is. We had that fatality as a result of a house fire on Gale Avenue. We had a firefighter injured in that. I'd like to talk a little bit about and not because it's in District 2, but because it's an integral part of our provision of public safety for the entire community. What are we doing with our rescue squad, Chief Solberger?
Good evening, everybody. I appreciate this discussion point. In 2019, we had Rescue 1 and Rescue 2 were taken out of service, decommissioned due to budget cuts. Through that process, we've learned how to take those duties and responsibilities, those operations, to our truck companies. Once I became the fire chief here, working with Local 50 and our workforce, we established a jump crew at Station 11, putting Engine 11 back in service, establishing a jump crew with Rescue 1. So we still have the same amount of personnel with 3 firefighters, 2 apparatus. They have the ability with our leadership to determine which resource should be deployed.
What in the world is a jump crew? What does that mean? Does that mean we're not staffing it the way we should, and that's why they're jumping like jelly beans?
Yes, so as I previously stated, it's still the same amount of personnel. We still have 3 firefighters at Station 11 with 2 resources. So depending on the call, they'll decide whether or not they take Engine 11 or they take Rescue 1.
So we really don't have a dedicated rescue squad as such.
That's
I
correct.
mean, to me, that is malpractice. Sorry, Mayor, but that is city malpractice. And that is putting all of our citizens in harm's way. And Manager, I discussed this with you, and we had our convivial meeting, and it was very nice, and I did tell you I'd come back and revisit this. But we need a rescue crew that is properly manned or womaned or whatever you want to say, staffed. It makes no sense to me. And in reality, according to our contract, we should have 3 people on that rescue squad. And what do we have on it now?
There was an agreement that was agreed to by the City of Peoria Fire Department and Local 50 to establish a jump crew with Engine 11 and Rescue 1.
With 1?
No, with 3 personnel at Station 11. But it was an MOU that was agreed to by both parties. We sat down and explored this, and this is what we came up with.
So if this council wanted to dedicate 2 people to that rescue squad, it would cost about $1.1 million, correct?
The way that I understand this, we have workshopped this loosely. I would be willing to take this time and energy and effort working with the city manager and the finance director to give you a report back.
Well, I definitely would like a report back because, see, I don't take public safety for granted. And public safety is our number 1 responsibility. I can't imagine any great city running a rescue squad like this. Prior to January of 19, we had 2 rescue squads. In the Peoria Fire Department, we have a fire engine to extinguish fire. That makes sense. Rescue squad to search for victims, and then the truck to secure gas, electric, set ladders, ventilate to relieve the heat and smoke. Everyone knows that's their task, but it seems like the rescue squad is kind of left out, inadequately staffed, and if we have a problem in another part of the city, now what do we do, Chief? How do we man that?
Our response model right now is we have 12 engines, 3 trucks, and as I mentioned, the 1 jump crew. We send our effective response force with our 17 firefighters in trying to get to that scene. So that being said, obviously those resources are pulled from other territories, other districts, and so when in the event that that happens and we have a working house fire, we move our resources around town and try to create a scenario that is most beneficial to the community to respond to incidents as this fire is going on.
And that takes what? Time. And time means lives in your business. It means lives in the police business. It's a big deal. And we had Local 50 come forward with a proposal that we passed to help generate more money as it relates to, and Chief, would you like to remind the council on this, what we passed?
In regards to fire recovery?
Yes.
That is correct. It's been in place since, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's June of this year. Year to date, I provide a report to the city manager occasionally. We're just over $90,000 in revenue that's generated from fire recovery.
And what other department do we ask to raise money like this to fund something that's a core basic service? I don't think we've asked our superintendent of police to go out and do bake sales or come up with novel ways of raising money using policing. But Local 50, in concert with our fire administration, did something really great. And I can't imagine a better way of spending some of that money than by properly staffing our rescue vehicle. Now, my understanding is in order to do that, if the council signs off on it, we have to have a memorandum of understanding from Local 50 because there's supposed to be 3 on the vehicle. Is that correct?
Contractually, the manning for apparatus that's in service, it specifically states 3.
Long time ago, council members, I found that it was very difficult sometimes when we had upper level management not wanting something to happen to ask a department head what their professional opinion was. So I'm not going to ask you for your professional opinion. You have too many years until you are going to retire. But I remember sitting across the way under a previous city manager and a previous fire chief who got a little upset about the way things were going in town because, again, we were trying to fund the fire rescue service on a shoestring. And he stood right up there where Chief Sahlberger is now, and with a tremendous amount of courage said, "My name is Roy Modglin, and here's my rank and my serial number and my address. And this is what I believe is needed to properly protect the people of this community." Of course, he was close to retirement. So I'm not going to ask you any questions. I'm going to put it on the policymakers here to direct our city manager to fashion a budget to pay for that, if the votes are here. If they're not here, then I guess I have to abide by the democratic process. But I think we'll rue the day, especially when we go out and tell people, oh, we're all about funding public safety and roads first. Liars. And then when we finally reopened a firehouse down at Hurlburt and MacArthur Highway, I can remember some people saying it was Chicago-style politics. Remember that? Oh, fire rescue services is a dirty word in some circles in Peoria. Thank God that got reopened when it did because we had the high-rise fire down at Glen Oak Apartments, and I can go into more detail on that. We are not overstaffed. We're not over-lavish with our spending on fire rescue services. Core basic services. So, Chief Sahlberger, will you work with the city manager and bring back a plan that we can vote up or down? Let's see where the people stand around the horseshoe on this important issue of properly staffing the fire rescue vehicle.
Yes, Counselor, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In that report back, Chief, could you give us a listing of the number of calls that the rescue squad has been on? We appreciate your very thorough description on significant events and the breakdown. I think that's been very helpful for all of us. And off the top of my head, I can't remember if that's broken out separately, but if you could provide that with the report back, that'd be great. Thank you.
We can do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilman Graham?
Yes, if I could elaborate a little bit on that. Thank you, Councilman Riggenbach. You've stimulated my thinking. We recently bought a new armored vehicle for the police department. We don't call it an armadillo, do we? What do we call it? We call it a Bearcat. How often do we use that, folks? Speaking of utilization reviews, Rarely. But by God, when we need it, we need it. So that's my answer on a utilization review as it would come in on this rescue squad. If I could just change the subject a little bit and go to another topic whenever you're ready.
Go right ahead.
When we have, and Chief, this isn't necessarily for you, it's for everybody who works in our city government. What are we doing about mentally ill people who are a threat to themselves and others who are walking on our streets in our neighborhoods? What are we as a city doing about it? And what conversations have we commenced with mental health authorities, judges, juvenile court system, to deal with people who are threats, known threats to themselves and others?
Councilman, I'm going to ask the chief to come forward and talk about the status of the co-response program that we've adopted and where we are with that currently, just to give you an update on that.
Yes, good evening. So we're in the process of doing interviews currently for the director position. It's a very important position to get the co-response program up and running. We've interviewed several people. We have several more to go through, and we want to be very intentional in hiring the right person to take the lead. And then we'll be hiring the 8 social workers alongside that director to really start working on these mental and behavioral health calls and the case management of those.
Well, that's really not a responsive answer. It's not responsive. We've got mentally ill people who are walking our streets who are a threat to themselves and others. We have received repeated calls from citizens about one of these. Probably hundreds of calls, counselors, and the law-breaking continues. It continues. And we know this person is mentally ill. There's more than one. Last night, I was concerned that that person would freeze to death on one of our streets. So what's the police department doing? Oh, we'll send an officer up there. Well, we're always glad to have an officer go, but what are the officers supposed to do? It is essentially and fundamentally a police matter, yes, when they're violating our laws, pounding on cars, standing in the street, trespassing repeatedly. It is a police issue, yes, it is. But then after it's a police issue, what are we doing about it? Are we arresting them? Or is there no point arresting them because the Safety Act means they're going to get released if they're taken to the jail? Tell me, Chief, how does that work?
Well, we've seen what's happening, right? The person that you're talking about is on probation. We're talking with probation. We're notifying the state's attorney to revoke probation. It's in their hands right now. We continue the cite, move along, call ERS, try to have a involuntary committal done. So yeah, we do need the social services aspect of it to get in there and continue to follow up on that. We're not going to arrest our way out of the person that you're talking about. They need some help.
That's exactly my point. However, if that person is endangering others, pounding on cars, endangering himself or herself, and we got more than one, I'm not talking about just one person. I think you're handicapped. But in a way, I kind of blame you because you're not coming to us and telling us, folks, I can't deal with this. You as a city council and as leaders of this community need to discuss what we're doing with these people, with our mental health authorities and with our judges. We're not having that conversation in Peoria. And then we wonder, oh, how did that happen up in Maine the other day? The authorities had ample warning that something was coming. We have ample warning that something is coming on Main Street too, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to predict it right now. And we need to do more than just send the police up there to say, move on. It's not working. And I have probably sent, I don't know how many different business people, neighborhood people, tried to explain to them what we were doing. But you know, bottom line is, after a certain length of time, they say, well, that's what he said last time. And the problem still exists. Problem still exists.
It's no easy answer, Councilman.
There is an easy answer.
What's the easy
We need
answer?
to commence discussions yesterday with the appropriate mental health authorities. We're supposed to be a humane blue state. We're a blue state. You know what that means? We supposedly care about people. We don't care about people. That's nonsense. If we do, it's not showing here in the city of Peoria. And ultimately, I have one employee. And city manager, I'm tired of talking to you about these same problems. And if these were occurring in any one of the other 5 districts, I would hope, unless it's malpractice, political malpractice, that that particular district council person would speak up. Things are only difficult because we make it difficult. And this person has been institutionalized. One of them. There's several more. But back out, breaking the law. So to send the officers up there, tell them to move on. It's a joke. Do you like getting my text messages at 10 o'clock at night? Do I like getting text messages from the business community, from motorists? No. And by the way, I'm paid less than you are. But pay doesn't animate me, never has. Now it's getting cold. 28, 29 degrees last night. I don't know where that person ended up going. Maybe we should say the police department scored a huge victory, although I don't think it's the police department's problem at this point. It is and it isn't. It's all of our problems. But when you say it's all of our problems, that means it's none of our problems. So guess what? Buck stops here. We have to figure out what we're doing about people who are a threat to themselves and others when we have ample documentation and warning before a motorist hits the person, or the person once again fights with the police officer or attacks hospital personnel or whatever. You're all on notice. You know. And if we need to have discussions with some of our judges, let's do it. If we need to have discussions on some of the repeat offenses that are committed by juveniles, let's have those discussions. And if the judges feel that they don't have to discuss, our public needs to know what their frame of mind is. We need to know where they're coming from. When the chief came to town, one of the first topics we discussed was this topic. We had a conference call. This has been, when did you come to town, Chief? A couple of years ago?
21, August 21, or July.
So, you know, there was an abatement of the problem for a while because they did what was right. They did a psychological evaluation. But what do we do when we know someone is mentally ill, but we can't find anybody in the family who would go through the commitment process? Now we're talking involuntary commitment. How does that work in our blue state? What is the intersectionality between civil rights of people and their suicide or potential homicide of others? Important questions. I want this problem dealt with. I don't want to see in our city anybody out there freezing on the street, getting in the street, standing in the street, taunting motorists. I don't care what damn district it's in. It's time to say enough. And manager, you're my only employee. I want this to end. And I want these conversations to begin because they should have begun a long time ago. Thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Gordon Young.
With all due respect, Councilmember Grayup, those conversations are being had. We had a meeting last week, and that was with the jail superintendent, myself as the lead mental health provider at the jail, and parole, probation, DHS, and we were coming up with ideas. So those conversations we are having. We're not ready to roll everything out yet, but the process is already in place. So what happens is if someone is referred to mental health court versus criminal court, then there's an entire system that they go through to receive services. The challenge is, and Chief and I talked about this briefly over the weekend, is what happens when they are released. You can't force Medicaid, and then we don't have yet inpatient centers or facilities that can house. I can't speak specifically, because I don't want to break confidentiality, but I can tell you, generally speaking, you can have all those things in place, but there's still always going to be some gaps if the individual does not want to get those services or continue with them. So again, it's the beginning, but those conversations are being had, those meetings are taking place. And Chief and I just talked about this a few days ago.
Thank you. Councilman Graham.
Chief, what do we do about a probation system that's not monitoring someone on an ankle bracelet?
Well, I don't oversee probation, right? So we continue to report, we continue to document, and we continue to forward those reports to probation.
You see, this is hydra-headed, Counselor Gordon Young. People aren't doing their jobs. It's not the police department. And then a judge says, oh, it's okay if this person has a substance abuse problem, works at a certain bar in town. That's like letting a fox into a chicken coop. I saw what was written. Can you imagine that? Oh, it's okay if he works at a bar, even though he has a substance abuse problem. I am very heartened to hear that you're working on something. Will it be in time before some disaster? I suspect even if we had a really good system intact, we know there are going to be some bad things that happen, even when the system's working optimally. But we're nowhere near optimal functioning. But I certainly appreciate everything you're doing. I have complete confidence in you. But we can't get it done soon enough. Thanks, Chief, for all your efforts. I know the men and women in blue have to be very frustrated because some of this is way above their pay grade. And yet they're asked to be miracle workers. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief. The plan is that next week we'll actually introduce motions to the floor.
That is correct.
Manager, have you been keeping track?
Yes, Mayor, we have a motion on the Evans Street project, a motion on Moffett Cemetery, a motion on the elimination of building fees, and a motion on fire rescue services. Fire rescue services.
Did he capture them all? Okay. Madam Clerk. Yes.
Are we ready to go on? Okay. We are at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council and Town Board.
Do we have any?
No, we do not. And we do not have an executive session, so we would be at adjournment.
Your ballots.
You got it.
Woman Jackson? Motion passes unanimously. Ooh. Oh.